So I want to have some real talk about loneliness. Loneliness is an experience that I have walked with for most of my life. I had an early childhood social trauma experience of being dumped by my very first best friend when I was in elementary school. We'd been best friends for years. That was really like my only friend at that time. I was a very shy, tender, timid child. And it was devastating to me to lose that. When she got too cool and stopped wanting to be friends with me, my heart was broken. My heart was broken for so long. And so something that I've been noticing and realizing for myself is that I've held a lot of shame about loneliness. I've held a lot of shame about feeling lonely. I really internalized some of that as a child as something was wrong with me. Something was wrong with me. And so loneliness became intertangled with shame. And it was something that I tried to hide, especially in my 20s. I know I felt a lot of shame about how lonely I felt, and I sought to really fill my life in ways to just like have something, have some sort of friend group. I felt shame about not fitting in. I felt shame about that early childhood experience of rejection. I internalized it as something about me that meant I would be rejected, and I had to just accept that I had to like fit parts of myself in different places in order to have any kind of sense of belonging. And so that's what I did for most of my life. I'm 38 now, and I'm just now learning how not to do that. I'm just now learning what it means to find spaces that can contain the wholeness of who I am. Because here's the thing about loneliness, here's the thing about not fitting in. It's not about not being good enough. It's actually about being more expansive than the spaces that are available to you. I had a narrative in my subconscious mind from that childhood experience of rejection. That narrative has been running in the background for my whole life, causing all kinds of unfortunate choices, causing a lot of low self-esteem. And the narrative was that I wasn't good enough. There was something about me that was wrong, that was bad, that was less than. That's why I was rejected. That's why I couldn't fit in. That's why I felt lonely. That's why it's been like I've had to squeeze parts of myself into different spaces to just like feel any kind of semblance of acceptance. When in reality, I am a deeply unique soul that doesn't fit into most preconceived places, that doesn't fit into a lot of aspects of cultural rules, that doesn't fit into the prescribed way of what our upbringing in this country and this culture teaches us is acceptable, is normal, is cool. To be cool means that you are prescribing to the dominant culture of the society in which you're living, which means that you fit yourself into a box. And maybe that box matches who you are. I suspect for most of us it doesn't. I suspect the people who feel cool often really feel lonely and alone too, no matter what their life actually looks like. I see a lot of people who fill emptiness with other people. I see a lot of people who fill their life with busyness, with social engagement, just to not have to face the loneliness. And so as heavy as this experience has been with me to walk with, I can also see and feel that there's a lot of strength in my capacity to not give in, especially at this stage in life. Like I'm no longer available for places where I have to squeeze part of myself into in order to feel a sense of acceptance. I'm no longer available to act like that is enough. I'm no longer available to force myself to feel fulfilled by filling up parts of me. And it doesn't mean completely checking out of anything. Like I'm still a human, I'm still living in the world, I still need social connection. So I'm finding ways and spaces of being able to connect in ways that feel real and authentic to me. But I'm also having this broader reframing for myself of loneliness and of the shame that I've carried throughout my life for feeling lonely. I don't want to run from my loneliness anymore. I don't want to hide from my loneliness anymore. I don't want to judge myself and my loneliness anymore. I want us to recognize that we live in a lonely society. We live in a society that teaches us that only parts of ourselves are acceptable, that only parts of ourselves can be contained. We live in a society that teaches us to numb, to disconnect, to dissociate, to get together with people and drink and do drugs and have fun and watch movies and escape. It's a lot of escapism. We live in a culture of escapism. And what does that do but push the loneliness just deeper inside? And it comes out in other ways. It comes out in addiction. It comes out in relational drama. It comes out in the ways that we talk to ourselves and the ways that we feel about ourselves. It comes out in living a sort of like half life. And that's just not the way that I'm willing to live anymore. I don't want an illusion of lack of loneliness anymore. I don't want to have people and spaces in my life that I'm using to just not have to feel that way. Because what that also does is it prevents us from being able to access the realest part of ourselves, because we're staying too wrapped up in busyness, we're staying too wrapped up in being occupied, we're staying too wrapped up in running away from that which we don't want to feel. And it prevents us from being able to feel what it is we actually feel. It prevents us from actually being able to be in our authenticity, our vulnerability, and that's what's going to help us find our true people anyways. I know I'm not alone in this. I know I'm not alone in this lifelong challenge. I know I'm not alone in the way that as a child I shut down my power and my bigness and the true capacity of connection that I possess and that I offer and that I deserve. I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not the only one who shut that down in order to try and survive in this colonial capitalistic society that boxes us in and keeps us small and wants us to remain powerless. And I'm just not willing to do that anymore. I'm not available for socializing for the sake of socializing. I'm not available for collective escapism under the guise of parties and social spaces and staying busy. I know I'm on a pathway to real connection because I see it all around me more and more with each step I take along this journey. And sometimes it's hard when it doesn't feel like it's happening as fast as my brain, my consciousness, my hurt inner child might want it to. But I would rather be lonely than fake. I would rather be lonely than partially filled. I would rather give myself that space and that time and that capacity to really understand the deeper levels, to really connect with my deeper self, to really allow myself that healing time and space to feel what I'm feeling, to feel what I felt as a child and didn't understand then. I would rather be lonely and whole within myself than only part of myself and occupied socially with other people. So it feels like in a way I'm giving myself the gift of loneliness. As counterintuitive as that might seem, it feels in a way like I'm giving myself the gift of loneliness. And it's ironic because I've never been this connected to community spaces that like truly genuinely feel like home for me. Yet this is the first time in my life that I am setting high boundaries with intimacy, setting high boundaries with who has deeper access to me, really prioritizing myself within that. Not letting that hurt inner lonely child sort of like reach out and grasp somebody just because they're there, but really taking the time to be with me, really taking the time to center myself, really taking the time to sit within that loneliness, feel it fully, feel it deeply, so I'm not reaching out and grasping from a place of desperation or a place of escapism or a place of not wanting to feel, because that's what gets us in trouble. That's what's gotten me in trouble. That's how we land in codependency. That's how we dive in too quickly with people. That's how we end up missing parts of our deeper selves and our deeper human experience. And I get the urge and the tendency, believe me, I get it. But I've been down that road. I'm not willing to do it anymore. So I'm sitting here, I'm embracing the loneliness, looking it in the eye, recognizing that it's not just an experience for me, it's an experience most of us are having, maybe all of us in some ways. And when we can be with what we're feeling, when we can really allow ourselves to be there, to feel it fully, to not run, to not escape, within that there's power, within that there's healing, within that there's a way of connection with ourself, which is really at the core of what we're craving anyways. So if you can relate to this, If you find yourself running from loneliness too, what are some of the roots of that? What are you afraid of feeling? What has it meant about you? What have you believed about yourself because of the loneliness? Because it's not just loneliness. Loneliness is like the surface level experience, but very often there's stuff underneath that. Very often there's internalized shame about who we are, about the ways that we don't fit in, about the ways other people are connecting and we're not connecting. So how can we detach from some of those deeper meanings? How can we allow ourselves to recognize loneliness as a product of the culture and society we're existing within? It's not a judgment on who we are. It doesn't mean anything about our character as a person. It doesn't mean anything about our worthiness of fitting in. I think there's actually a lot of strength and power in not fitting in. That's where I find most strength and power exists, is through the experience of not fitting in. So what are the stories that we've told ourselves about our loneliness? Is that where the pain of the loneliness is actually coming from? And how can we start to disconnect those stories from the feeling of loneliness itself? How can we begin to embrace loneliness, accept loneliness, maybe walk with loneliness, recognize it as a season of life without internalizing that experience, without creating narratives and stories, or perhaps more likely letting narratives and stories play out in our subconscious about what it means about who we are. This is what I'm sitting with. This is what I'm seeking to detach for myself, really letting go of that inner child narrative that developed at such a young age that it meant that there was something wrong with me. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with me or any of you if you don't fit into society, as we've talked about before and we'll probably keep talking about in future videos too. That's actually a strength. It means you're special. It means you're unique. It means you're not here to just go along with the status quo. It means you're here to make things a little bit better for yourself and for other people around you. So can we give ourselves permission to feel lonely? Can we give ourselves permission to see the strength, the gift, and the invitation that lies in that experience? Can we find the power and the hope that exists in loneliness too? Because loneliness is ultimately about desiring deeper connection. And this disconnected colonial reality we're living in, it is not it. It ain't it. It's not what most of us need. So can we really allow ourselves to embrace the gift of loneliness and the invitation that it is asking for, to bring the wholeness of who we are, to be in the wholeness of who we are, to not sacrifice that, but to embrace it and to give ourselves permission so that we can ripple that out into the world and create a different kind of culture where people don't have to grow up with this experience. All of our cultural conditioning is optional and we can continue to keep doing it, or we can have that stop with us. So what does it mean to step up into loneliness as a power so that that's not something that we have to pass on to future generations? All of this is swirling in my soul right now. I know that's part of why loneliness has been such a big part of my life journey, because it gives me power to create spaces where other people don't have to feel the same way that I felt, because I relate so deeply to that. So what's the invitation of loneliness for you? What is it asking for of you? How can you begin to find more of yourself rather than disconnecting or dissociating from yourself as a result of loneliness? And how can we lean into this so we can be the last generation to suffer in the same kind of a way? Ain't this getting old? Aren't we ready for something else? I think we are. Let's shift it. Let's shift to a culture of authenticity, vulnerability, places and spaces that can contain the wholeness of who we are. Those are the antidotes to loneliness. And through our experience and embracing of loneliness and not running away from loneliness, that's how we create more of those spaces. That's the culture I'm seeking to ripple out. I hope that's the culture you're seeking to ripple out as well. Let's do that together. In our loneliness together, we don't have to be alone.